policy choice made by the city. Those are big homes, primarily down there, where the 710 was going to be built, and Caltrans bought a bunch of homes years ago. And the city's made a choice to sell most of them. They're acquiring them from Caltrans and use the money for cheaper affordable housing in other parts of the community. And so we'll see how that all works out. But the theory is that those houses are they'll need a lot of work. And so sell them to people that are willing to put the money in to fix them up rather than convert them to affordable housing. There's a great bunch of questions here. And no censorship, we'll just take them as they come.
Can I I'm so sorry. I just have like a piggyback or like a further question about those houses. Could you kind of give like a little bit more detail about like the transactions? So they've sold them to...
Yeah, the state, as I understand it, has sold them to the city for the cost that the state paid for them eons ago. So pennies on the dollar. And they are now, the city will then convert all of the profit from what they buy them for and what they sell them for and dedicate that to the city's affordable housing fund.
Okay.
I don't know why that's going on. So, what about using all the vacant stores and offices around the city for housing? We have an emergency on our hands. The rules should be changed. That's a great question. And as a member of the Planning Commission, we are trying to make it much easier to do what's called adaptive reuse. To take vacant stores, because there's going to be less stores. We know that in the future. I knock on doors a lot, and I see a lot of Amazon packages where people are not going to their local stores. So we're going to have less retail going forward. And offices, at least post-COVID, seem to be shrinking as well. So there is opportunity to do that. The questioner, though, is raising the question of, what about an emergency? What's involved in taking a space? Because you operate housing. How do we take something that in an emergency versus all the bells and whistles that go into completely converting something over for the long term?
We do have a really good example of that, and that's when COVID hit. Remember what the first thing they said to us when COVID hit? Stay home, stay safe. Well, if you don't have a home, guess what? It was hard to stay safe. So there was the emergency declarations happening, and the state started the PRK, Project Room Key, where they rented motels. And they put people inside motel rooms, individual motel rooms. We have congregate shelters, so dorm-style shelters, which are the old style. We had to take people out of there. It was too many people. We couldn't have people together. And we used these motel rooms. And what we saw is that during COVID, it stabilized the population. We got more people off the street during COVID than we had in forever. And the other thing that came out of that, which was really interesting, we talked earlier about resistance. Well, how many people want to sleep in a big dorm with 50 strangers that you don't know, that could rob you, that, whatever, have issues? Most people don't. When we went to the motel model, we didn't see resistance. People were willing to go inside because they had their own space, they had their own bathroom, and it made the world of difference. So we can do it. We can absolutely do it, and we've since used the motel model to actually turn them into housing. Speaking about more reasonably priced housing, the state has funded a number of these purchasing motels and then turning them into studio apartments. So we showed that with COVID we could do it, but now that COVID's over, a lot of these programs have stopped, but the emergency hasn't stopped. So we need to be re-looking at things like that. Unfortunately, when it comes to a lot of businesses that are open, what we find is not so much that cities or counties are against it, it's the business owners don't want it. And so that's where we're having trouble. We would love to take some, like a mall that's going under and turn it into studios. It's a lot of the business community doesn't want it, they want it for retail.
So here are a couple of provocative and pretty common questions. When do we stop enabling through handouts and start preventing with stricter policies? We can't keep supporting with our tax money. And is affordable housing really the problem? Because you said 1/3 are chronic, almost 1/3 are on drugs, 1/3 have mental illness. By the way, those are overlapping typically. That's not 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. That's a lot of the folks have more than one condition. But it's a fair question. Are we enabling by putting tax dollars into this? And I think we'd like to hear from other folks on the panel. Let me just start by saying the only thing more expensive than dealing effectively with homelessness is not dealing effectively with homelessness, because our tax dollars are being spent as well on jails, on emergency rooms, on all kinds of sanitation services, and the human cost of having business districts decline because people are afraid to go there, etc. So there's a very real cost to not dealing with the problem. How we deal with the problem, though, is a fair question. And I, as a person of faith, I would never question when someone gives someone food in a park or a sleeping bag. I understand that. That does not solve the problem. That is, and in many ways, I think we have enabled homelessness because there's no alternative to not enabling homelessness. And I think we need alternatives to enabling homelessness. We need to be ending homelessness. Because as long as people are out on the street, a meal is better than going without a meal. But it perpetuates a normalization of the idea that some people are just going to live out on the streets in tents. That, I think, is not sustainable. It's hellishly expensive in terms of the tax dollar. It's hellishly expensive in terms of the toll on the mental and physical health of people who are outdoors. And it exacts a huge toll on our community to see area parks and business districts taken over by people who are not housed. But I'll leave it to others to address legitimate, fair questions about, are we enabling homelessness?
I think everything that Rick has said is exactly right. The cost of letting it go is immense. It's in multiple ways, there are costs. I think what we have to recognize is that people don't choose to be homeless. That is a myth. Nobody wakes up one day and says, you know what, I think I'm gonna go live under an underpass and pee in the gutter and forage in garbage cans for foods. They just don't do that. People's lives fall apart in a variety of ways. And to me, it's not enabling people to help them out of that. What is enabling is exactly what Rick said. If we make people more comfortable in their homelessness, which is what we did for years. Try to provide services for the homeless, food for the homeless, all of those things, but what we want to do is solve the issue. When you get people into housing and on the pathway, it's providing services that support their journey to stability, to wellness, to self-determination. That's not enabling, that's helping people grow and deal with trauma, etc. Now, there are going to be a lot of people who are never going to be able to go get a job and support themselves because they have a variety of disabilities. We have a lot of people on the streets who have severe mental health issues, who have severe learning disabilities. We see a lot of adults becoming homeless because they've been looked after by their parents their whole lives because they had autism or they had severe ADHD and couldn't get a job that paid enough. Their parents died, they're now homeless. These are people that are going to need our help. And it's a mark of what kind of a society we want to be as to whether or not we make sure that they are well and kept safe and healthy. There are those people that need a step up, and then they need education, jobs, to get back on their feet and to become contributing members of society. That's the whole focus of what our agencies and what our systems does, is looks at people individually and say, what do you need to be healthy members of society? Some of you are gonna need help for the rest of your lives, but that's true, we all have family members or friends that may need help. And some of you, we can help to get back on their feet. It's not enabling, it's helping people to move up, and that's what our goal should be as community members.
I just wanted to add one very brief thing to that, because again, you know, in my role, it's at a very street level understanding of what's going on out there. And I think one important thing to understand is that most homeless people they become homeless, they stay in the place where they became homeless, right? They're locals. This is their community. It was their community when they were housed, and it remains their community once they become homeless. This is where they want to stay, and they're not staying because somebody is providing meals on an occasional basis. They're not staying because of handouts in the park. They're not staying for those reasons. They're staying because this is their community. People have basic needs, and if you can't at least meet their basic needs and give them a place to bathe, a place to use the restroom, a place to store some of their belongings, a place to be able to find food and other basic items, they're going to go somewhere else, and they're going to stay in your community. We have an issue in the city that I work in where there's a prevailing attitude among a lot of people that if you build it, they will come. And if we put services in our city, then we're gonna get this flood of people from the outside who are gonna just come and take advantage of our access center. And the truth of the matter is that doesn't actually happen. We do have some people that come from the outside. We've had travelers from, you know, these kids that come in from Northern California and they pass through town, and we never see them again. But most of the folks that we're coming into contact with, again, became homeless in our city, and they remain because they have ties there. By not providing them with just the most basic of necessities, we're just putting it so that the rest of the community has to deal with the fallout of that. You know, like every time it rains, we know that we're gonna find transients in every carport because they have nowhere else to go. So this idea that if you build it, they will come, I've just never seen that played out in reality. And giving someone a place to just meet those basic needs is not gonna invite more people in your community. It just means that you're doing that for the people that belong there.
We have some